In the past, we've only used Lightroom to organize our pictures, and then we've gone to the original image file and opened that up in Photoshop and edited those through Camera Raw. What we're going to do today is we're actually going to use Lightroom to edit our pictures just as a preliminary edit before bringing them into Photoshop. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then we're going to export them from Lightroom, and then we are going to get started in Photoshop. So the first thing we need to do is import our pictures. So let's go to Lightroom. This is my super cute nephew, so you're welcome. Click File, Import. Oh, that was Export. Click File, Import Photos and Videos. And then navigate to where we've saved our pictures. I've saved a file of just the images we did in that second pose of Andrew, because that's the main component of this whole composite. So we'll make sure Add is selected because I've saved them in the folder I already want them in. And we'll click Import, bring those into Lightroom. First thing we'll do is what we normally do, which is we'll go through and filter out the pictures that we don't want to use. Then we'll go back through and select the ones that we do want to use, and then we'll make some adjustments on those and then start editing. So let's just go through here. Remember, P is pick and X is reject. So I'll just use those. I'll mostly just reject images right now that are the wrong exposure or blurry or the framing's wrong or something obviously wrong with them. And then I'll go back through and choose out of the good images which ones will actually work for the picture. So these first ones were me just kind of setting up the camera. For some of these, the flash in the background didn't go off, but it's kind of cool because now you can compare the difference between the ones where there's a background flash and the ones where there's no background flash. You can see how much easier this picture is going to be to cut out in Photoshop. That is like something, I don't know, like the arm here, that's something you could do with like a couple clicks in Photoshop and get a perfect selection. Here, it might be a little more difficult because the background is a little darker. Honestly, this would still be pretty easy, but you get the idea, and that's why it's important to, with this kind of picture, have a background flash to make it super easy to cut out. You can see on the hair, that's going to make a huge difference between this and this to cut out because these are pretty similar, and it's definitely doable, but it would take a lot more time to do. That's just one of those things where knowing how to shoot really makes you look like you're better at compositing in Photoshop, because if you shoot right, do everything correctly, set up your lighting correctly, you just know the basic principles of shooting for composite photography, you'll know what to do. So like adding this little flash to just the backdrop, right? So I have a flash right here, I pointed it back to this white wall, and now this is going to be extremely easy to cut out, which is great. So I'm going to look like a pro, and it's just because I knew a little trick. If we had to cut out our subject from like something super complex, like, I don't know, like just a street background or like a tree or something, it would be so hard to get this hair. Like you'd probably just have to brush in hair and fake it that way, which can get good results, but it takes a lot more time and you have to know a lot more about what you're doing. So just understanding the basics of composite photography when you're shooting makes a world of difference when you go into the edit. So I'm not choosing my favorites yet. I'm just quickly going through all of these and rejecting the images that aren't good images, that mostly it's the exposure that I'm looking at, or the ones where the flash just didn't go off in the background. It's cool because like pictures like this, so my assistant was Ford that day. He was flipping up Andrew's hair so that we could get this cool like floating effect. We're not too worried about the hair down here because for this image we're going to use one image of the face and the hair coming over his face here, and then a different image for the hair in the back to make it look like it's more like floating, I guess. But you can see here, Ford is like inches away from his face, but we still see his face in here. There's a little bit of shadow from his hand. If you compare it to like these pictures, you can see right in here, the lighting's different. But if you didn't know that, and I just used this image and brought that into Photoshop, we'd get a good result. So I don't need to reject that because of the arm, even though it's just inches away. That one, there's really no coming back from. Okay, that one looks kind of like a World War II salute. So I'm gonna reject that because I don't want to have to. Also, I don't like it, but you know, if there's anything awkward in your images that you just don't want to have to accidentally like forget about. A lot of times when you're compositing, you're looking at a picture for so long that if something gave you an impression when you first saw it, but then you've kind of like looked at it again and gotten used to it, you don't realize that it's weird anymore. So if I put this picture in, that would kind of look weird, and I don't want that. So I'm just gonna deselect it now. When I have that first gut instinct to say, doesn't look right to me, I'll get rid of that. Some of these images where the cloth is going like in between his legs here, it looks kind of awkward as well. So I definitely don't want that when I'm looking through images to choose for the legs. For this right now, I'm looking at the arms, the head, the torso, and then I'll probably cut right along here for a different image for the legs. So this is obviously not a leg image that I would use, but I could use like his face here, you know. I don't want to rule it out just because the legs are bad. I have a lot of other options where I just focused on the posing for the legs that I'll choose from then. So don't need to worry about that. Again, I'm going to deselect that one. Okay, so you can see here we got some pictures just focused on the legs. And then here we had Ford pull up the fabric on a shirt and drop it so it would look more weightless. This one's not a very good example, but here you can see it kind of looks like it's floating. So these are good. I want to keep all these in here. I don't have to worry too much about the arms or the head. I'm mostly focused on like this right here. And I guess the legs too, because a lot of these would be good for the legs. Okay, so now I've deselected a lot of the images I don't want. What I'll do now is I'll turn my filters on down here. Click flagged. And now I can select what I want to see. So I didn't choose any images as like pics. I didn't press P to flag any images, but I only went through and deselected images. So I'll choose to show my flagged and non-flagged images, but not my deselected images. If I did that, you'd see them here. I don't want to have to deal with filtering through those again, so I'll just turn that off. And now when I deselect an image, it'll just disappear from my view at the bottom. Okay, so these pictures, there's really nothing here. These are when we were starting, so I'm gonna reject some of these. You can see when I reject them, it's showing up here, push X, and then it's gone. I can't like go back to it. If I wanted to see it, I would have to show my rejected images again. And this is helpful just when you're going through and filtering out pictures you don't want to use. So now I'm looking more at him, at the actual pose. There are like 3 or 4 main elements to this picture. So we have the legs, we have like the torso and the arms, we also have the face, and then we have the hair for the back of the head. And those images put together are going to make this part of the image, which is Andrew. So if there is one of those elements that works through these pictures, like obviously this wouldn't be a good picture for the overall composite, but maybe I would want to use like this back arm or something. And so I could keep it around if I did. I know I don't, so I'll just deselect that. Like some of these, like, yeah, the legs aren't great, right? It's not a dramatic pose for these. The cloth is just kind of hanging down here. But if I cut it like right here at the arms, I could use the arms and maybe like his face there. And I like this pose a little more. It's like more dynamic. So I'll pick that. And then, yeah, I like these ones because these three are pretty similar. But I like these ones because what I'll probably do is I'll go through and I'll cut out the arm right at this line. It's a pretty sharp line that'll be pretty easy to cut out. And then I'll either like cut it out back here or blend it through here or blend the fabric here to whatever image we choose for the torso here and then for the legs. But just knowing that this will be easy to cut out is kind of one of the reasons I'm picking it, but also I like how it's more dynamic. It shows dimension. Okay, I don't really like these. Okay, so now we have the part where I zoomed in on his face. That's to capture the hair, but also the expression on his face. So we'll just go through these till we see something that'll look good. It took us a minute to really get the hose to work with the fan, and the fan wasn't very strong, so we had to kind of practice a little bit before we really got to something that would work. So this, I'll probably pick this because it looks, remember that he's kind of falling down through the water, so it would be pushing up against the back of his head. So like this area, especially right here, would probably look good for that. And here, this like has some good elements that I can pull out and use on my image. So I'll select this one. And so now I have this picture that has some cool strands of hair that are sharp, that'll be easy to cut out. And then I have this one that has the general shape back here that'll probably look pretty good. I might select one more. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not super happy with the hair that we got in the back of his head. Didn't look great, so we're definitely gonna have to do some extra work to make that look good. Okay, I really like this one for his face. It's dramatic, he's kind of looking away, but it's covering his eyes. And when I show people his picture, they're gonna be like, wow, Gibson, you're really an artist. Which is what this is all about, attention. So make sure you're choosing the right pictures. Just kidding, I really did like that picture and that's why I picked it. Okay, so remember we have his face selected. We have some pictures just for the hair. Now we need the legs, and these poses for the legs are pretty good. Here what we had Ford do is he was picking up the fabric here and dropping it so it would look weightless, kind of like it's floating. And some of these looked really good. This one is my favorite. And this is great because it'll work for the legs pose as well. So remember I had that picture where his arm was coming in front of him. And then I can cut it out right around here, and this will be the rest of the picture. So select that. And because his shoe is covered here, I'm gonna need to select one more image. So this one right before it, his shoe isn't covered, but it's essentially the exact same pose. So I'll be able to cut this out and put it over here because Ford was trying to step back after he had dropped the fabric here. So I'll select this one as well. And good, now let me see. So now I'll just show the selected images down here. I'll go through, make sure these are good. So we have his arms and chest here. We have his, let's see, the hair for the back of the head, some elements we can take out here. We have his face. So his head is tilted pretty far back here. And in this image, so it's going to have to be pasted right here. And you can see how where this line of his like chin and neck meets the arm. It's going to be hard to paint that out to make it match this pose. So it needs to look like he's just tilting his head back. So I'm going to go back here. I had like these, I had these 3 pictures that I liked. So this is the one we had picked. You can see his head is tilted up a little more. This one, his head is tilted back a little more, and it doesn't meet the arm at all. The arm comes back here, and then his shoulder kind of covers it. And this will be way easier to paste the other head on and make it look good. So I'll select this one. I'll unflag this one, and let's go back. So I have this picture here for his arms and upper body, and then the face is this one, and I can tell that it's going to be a good match. It'll be a lot easier to paste this on. We'll probably cut it out around right here. So follow a line about right there, and then blend the 2 images together. But to blend them together, we need to have something that will be able to blend without having to tweak the actual image or the pose. We might still have to tweak it, but like bring in some areas or just the mask or fake it somehow, but this will be a lot easier to do. Okay, so we have those, and then we have, let's see, oh yeah, we have the legs and torso here, and then this one's just for the foot. Okay, so these 6 images are our pictures, and what we're gonna do is we're now gonna go through and edit them. So I've been on the library tab here. That's good for selecting the images you want, going through them, but not actually making changes to the images. Now I'll click on develop. Under library, I could go to the side here and there's a quick develop option, but I want to develop, and now I have a lot more that I can do. So our first option here is to adjust the white balance of the image. I'm going to be changing the coloring of this image so much in Photoshop that I'm not too worried about it here. If I go to auto, I'm mostly working, like I'm not worried about the background at all or anything. I'm looking at the skin tones, and it looks pretty blue here. We're going to put him underwater, so maybe blue is a good thing. I don't know. We'll just put it to auto. And then under tone here, we can select some different options to adjust the like highlights, shadows, exposure, and stuff. So I'll click auto. You can see here in the hair, if I undo it, we get so much more detail. In the hair, it brought the shadows up a lot, which is something I usually like to do. You can see like his shoes and in the jeans, if we undo that, they're kind of darkened out here. It just shows so much more detail. So we'll do that, and then I don't really want to adjust anything else. Again, the color isn't super important for these because we're going to be making him look pretty much just blue because he's going to be underwater. So I won't change that. I could come through here and add a curve and add some adjustments that way. I don't want to do that because I'm going to save that for Photoshop. And then there's some more specific options here. You can adjust the hue values of, so you can like target the reds, or we'll do the oranges so we can see it in his skin. If we target the oranges, we could make them like change the hue on just those, which you can get some really cool results from if you don't overdo it. But we're not going to do that right now. Just the hue of the highlights and the shadows. Work on the detail or noise reduction. Here's the lens correction option. This is really useful if you've shot a somewhat distorted image, like if you used a fisheye lens and it looked more like this and you wanted to just bring it down a little bit, you could do that here. A lot of people will use this option to make people look more thin. If it's like a portrait and their face is here, they'll like bring it down and then it kind of squishes everything in. That's a really cheap way to make someone look more thin. And it would just be easier to have an honest conversation with them about healthy body image. Or you could use a lot more specific options in Photoshop. So yeah, it's really obvious when people have done that, especially if you know about this feature. You can spot it so easily and it just looks cheap. Not good. Okay. Oh yeah, under here, so we have the white balance, tone, and presence. Presence deals with the contrast of the colors and the sharpness of the image. So if we look at clarity, I'll zoom in here, and if we brought the clarity down, it looks like this. It's kind of like tried to like make it a little more smooth, so it's a lot less sharp. And then if we bring it up, it looks more like a sports magazine type of picture. You don't want to go too extreme with either of those options because again, it'll look cheap. A lot of new photographers have this complex where they feel they need to just let people know that they edited their picture. So they'll do something like this and be like, see, look, I took this picture, but I used Lightroom and I edited it. Can't you tell? And it's like, it looks terrible. It's not like artistic. It doesn't look good, but you can definitely tell they did something to it. And so you post that on Facebook and people are like, wow, look at your photography. You really did something to it. And in reality, it just looks bad. It's better to have good photography that looks effortless, a final composite that just looks like a good picture that tells a story or has a message or, is art, that rather than just doing something so you can prove that you did something. I'm not like trying to call out people, but it's probably subconscious. You just think, oh, wow, look, I did this tweak, but it really makes it look different and original. But everyone does that same thing when they go into Lightroom for the first time. So it doesn't look different and it doesn't look original. If you bring the clarity down, it looks some like 80s wedding reception type of picture. Which again, if that's what you're going for, go for it. But I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm going to leave everything where it is. And then you can see down here, I have this icon. It says photo has develop adjustments. So I'm going to right click on this, go to develop settings, click copy settings. I can choose what settings I want. I just have them all selected. Choose copy, and then I can select the rest of the images. So if you hold down shift, it's like if I have them deselected, I select this one, hold down shift, and then click on the last image I want. It'll select everything in the middle. If you click control, it'll just select one at a time, but add them to your selection. So I'm selecting all the images that I haven't already adjusted. I'll right click, go to develop settings, and click paste settings. And now these all have the same settings on them. Because I didn't make changes to my camera, they all now look the same. Great. Now what I'll do is I'll select them all, click File, Export, and now we have our export options. There is another thing you could do. If I right click on a picture in here, I could do Edit In and select Edit in Adobe Photoshop. That would create a dynamic link between this image and my Photoshop image. And then if I came back in here and wanted to make new adjustments, those would show up in my Photoshop version. But it can slow down your computer a lot when you use Adobe Dynamic Links. And I don't want to make any other adjustments. I don't want to have to deal with that, because if I like cut out stuff and then, I don't know, it would just show up here. And I don't want it to show up here. I want this to be my raw image that I've tweaked a little bit. But then if I like went into Photoshop, made a bunch of changes, and then I was like, you know what, I need to change something in Lightroom, I just come back to here and re-export this picture. So I'll select them all, click File, Export. This will export them as new files, so brand new images that will open in Photoshop. So you can choose where to export. So I'll choose same folder as original folder, or as original photo. And then I'll select put in subfolder. I've named this Andrew Lightroom Exports. And now I'll choose the file naming. So if I choose a custom name and then sequence, what it'll do is I'll add the custom name, and then it'll start with 1. Since there's 6 pictures, they'll be called Andrew 1, Andrew 2, Andrew 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's how I want them. I don't need to get more specific than that because there's only 6 pictures. Save them as PSD documents, and then don't resize or change anything else. We'll click Export. And now we're ready to open up these brand new files into Photoshop.